Welcome to Behaviorally Speaking Leadership for Changemakers. I'm your host, Dr. Bob, and today I'm joined by Luciana Mayo, board certified behavior analyst, doctoral candidate, and behavior-based leader. Join us as we explore her leadership journey and discover how behavior shapes the way we lead, serve, and create lasting change. Well, welcome to the show, Luciana. How are you doing today?
Good. I'm doing awesome. How are you?
I'm doing good. It's such a pleasure to have you here. And, we've been in the field together for some time, even through like school years and all that stuff. But it's just good really to connect with you in this forum to kind of just chat, and have a conversation about all the things we work on, the things we do on a daily basis. So I'm really looking forward to our chat, Luciana, and I'm looking forward to what I'm going to learn from you this evening.
I'm excited also.
Wonderful. All right. Well, let's start out a little bit with kind of talking about leadership, right, and ABA, because we're both behavior analysts and then we're both in like leadership roles. So I thought that might be a good place to start the conversation. So thinking, Luciana, on your experience as a leader, experience as a behavior analyst, and thinking of that relationship between the science of applied behavior analysis, ABA, right, and then the art of leadership, how would you define leadership, Luciana, in your own words from a behavioral perspective?
And asking this really takes me back to getting my hours back in school and reading that article in behavior artistry.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yeah.
I remember that now.
That was the first thing that popped in my head when I
Yeah.
So from a behavioral perspective, I would say leadership, is that reference for observable and measurable behaviors from our standpoint. Is how leaders behave, their actions and interactions with others, like providing feedback, the goals that we're setting, reinforcing performance. I think by setting goals, providing the training and feedback, sort of like we do behavior skills training. We can observe individuals and then figure out, what they need to be trained in, where do we sort of need to fill in the gap, and what we need to do to either see their behaviors increase or decrease, just like we do with the client. I think the art part mixes in there in the whole process, because when I think of art, I'm thinking about creativity, technicality, and that's displayed in the way that we sort of express our ideas, how we create the goals and working with the individuals.
Yeah, I like that. A lot of what you said, Luciana, because I heard you say, and I'm going to just paraphrase, like, figuring out what they need, right? And then providing that. I believe, that's what I heard you say, and it makes me think of, it aligns with my thoughts on it because, as you know, just from our experiences together, like, I'm really focused on, like, helping people succeed. So, but the only way to do that is to find out, like you're saying, what are the things that they need, and then arranging whatever, contingencies we need to provide in the environment to help them to be successful. So I really like, the explanation you provided. And through what you said, I think, Luciana, what you'd be doing is setting up the conditions so they can thrive, right? They can move from where they are to where they could be, but like they continue to thrive and grow. So I think that was a good start to our conversation. I like that. Yeah. So on that note, Luciana, right, you talked about leadership, you talked about behavioral artistry, right? And then what that means from your perspective. In your view then, Luciana, what would you say is the most critical behavioral principle every leader should master? Like you led off with saying, all right, this is my view of leadership, but in all of that, what do you think is the one thing that's the most critical skill that they need to master or principle?
I feel like that's a hard one to narrow down because there's so many principles in the ABA. And I feel like they're always coming up with something new. I don't know if I can identify just one. I feel like there's so many.
You can list a few if you want to.
I can have some lenience with this. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So I would say generalization. I mentioned behavior skills training, positive reinforcement in no particular order. I'm really big on collaboration with the parents, school staff, one-to-one support related services. So generalization would be one of those most important, like behavioral principles. Not only because it ensures that what we're teaching them can be applied across different settings and situations, but across all those different people that I just mentioned. I think it's important that everyone be aware what others are working on the changes that are being made and communicate with each other as much as possible, just so that everyone's on the same page and there's no conflict. And the client could be working on one thing with one person, one thing with the other, and there's this disconnect,
Yeah.
which I've experienced a lot. So I think the collaboration or the generalization is very important. What else would I say? Behavior skills training, I would say, is another principle that basically guides all my training when I learned it. Because initially, when I would train individuals, I felt like sometimes going in the field, you're like all over the place and trying to figure out yourself and how you want things to be. But the BST, I feel like, sort of guided me and sort of gave me a pathway because it lays it out for you, right? So I feel like when I was training, my facilitation of training became more effective and efficient. So through that process, it breaks it down so that we're providing instruction, modeling, rehearsing, and feedback. And then that can be used with not only training the staff, but the parents and the individual.
Yeah.
And then positive reinforcement, definitely. Who doesn't like to be, praised, whether it's the client or the staff? And we know that that is more likely to increase the behavior, and we'll see it, it happen again. I think it's important that we recognize that that's a powerful tool that I feel like sometimes lack, especially for the staff. I know in talking to staff, like over the years of being in the field, a lot of them don't feel like they get acknowledged and rewarded.
Yeah.
So, like I said, who doesn't like to be reinforced?
Mm-hmm. I love those. You said behavior skills training, generalization, and reinforcement. I think those are three really good ones, Luciana. The behavior skills training, so I do, we do, you do. I really, just like you said, I really like to emphasize that a lot because it shows that initial support, gives them the opportunity to see us doing it. And I think it also creates trust as well. Like, oh, like, all right, she can do this, he can do this, they're doing it too. And then give them the opportunity to share the flow with us. And then, all right, no, you can fly your wings on your own. And then generalization too is good, Luciana, because it made me think of what we ultimately want to do when we think of leaders and leadership is be able to transfer our skills, right? So then they can step in, right? We're like, all right, we could not be there. We're like, all right, we're confident. They got this. They can do the job. So I think of that too, where we can kind of, as we say, work ourselves out of a job, not literally, but, and then reinforcement. Yeah. 100% I agree with you. I think what I would add, Luciana, to the reinforcement is, which, we do with the kids all the time. Well, us as behavior analysts, we say it, but like that sort of like precision, but discrimination training, meaning that it's behavior specific, right? So if we're going to reinforce, like saying specifically what it is. So I did this today with two staff that really stepped up to support a child and the family, right? And they really went off the way. It's not even a student on, the caseload per se, but they did that. So today I followed up with them and said, I really gave them the specific praise, like how you followed up, called me, let me know what was going on, gave me all the information, and then checked in again the following day just to make sure, that the child was okay, the family was okay. And then also said to them, that's really exemplifying leadership at all levels. Like, you know what I mean? Like they took it upon themselves. So yeah, what are your thoughts on it being like specific when we deliver reinforcement or praise to our staff?
No, I agree. I should have said that. And I feel like under your supervision, you really drilled that in me. So making sure that it is specific, especially like when you're working with kiddos who are working on understanding things. And if you just say to them, good job, well, did they pick somebody really fast between that time that they just followed the direction? Are you saying good job to that? So really being specific and pointing out, oh, like, good job just, hanging up your coat, or, good job going to your seat, so that they know specifically, this is what I'm getting at attention.
Yeah.
Especially if the behavior is attention seeking.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I can get the attention by engaging in this behavior. So yeah, definitely letting them know specifically. And even for staff, we're specifically acknowledging what they're doing. It lets them know that we're paying attention.
Yeah.
Again, they're getting that attention and being acknowledged for what they're specifically doing.
And I also like what you just said, Luciana, about paying attention. Because, in our field and in our roles, we get so busy. And sometimes staff might believe we're not seeing, we're not paying attention. But we literally are. We may not necessarily be able to, in that specific moment, say something, acknowledge it, but we truly are. That's a really good point you made. when it's comforting to staff and others when they know, like, all right, they're actually paying attention. They're seeing me. They're hearing me. Yeah.
Mhm.
So
And
that
that brings
brings
up
me. Yeah, go
sorry.
ahead. No, you go.
I was going to say that brings up another important thing, like where we try to do things in the moment. The importance
Yeah.
of that can really make a difference versus
Mm-hmm.
waiting till later, and then you might forget later on.
Exactly.
I knew I
Exactly.
wanted to say good job for something, but I don't remember what it was because so much stuff happened throughout the day.
Yeah, and 100%. And to Luciana, with just the way the world is now, and like there's just so much happening all at once. So, your point is even more valid just because of, everything that's happening and everything is changing. There's more people, receiving services, all those kinds of things. So there's lots of different changes and new things. So yeah, that's a really valid point. Because I feel like even if it's not praise, but like, and, with age and all that stuff, Luciana, I'm like, okay, I just had this thought in my head. I don't remember. And I can tell you, Luciana, I use Post-its. I use Post-its a lot more. I use Post-its a lot more. I put stuff in my calendar, every little thing I have to do, because I'm like, yep.
Yes, where it will not get done.
And no one will get done. So you have a valid point about like in the moment, 100%. I agree with you there. So everything you talked about, Luciana, really to me are examples of like, being a leader and doing the things we need to do to support those that we lead, right? But then at the same time, I think of us as BCBs, as board certified behavior analysts, like foundationally, we're clinicians, right?
Right.
Secondarily, we're leaders. So how in your opinion does our role, right, as a BCBA differ, right? What's the difference between us being a BCBA in terms of being a clinician and us being BCBAs in terms of being leaders?
Yeah, I believe they overlap a lot,
Yeah.
especially depending where you're at. But I would say the clinician role focuses on that direct treatment, right? So we're like
Yeah.
designing the treatment plans, conducting SPAs, analyzing data, providing
Yeah.
supervision and parent training. But when I think about the leadership role, that focuses more so on like coaching, training staff performance,
Mm.
service delivery, conducting audit,
Yeah.
ensuring compliance with ethical standards because the CB comes out with different standards every year. So it's like,
Yep.
um, yeah, but I do really think it depends where you're at in the field too, because sometimes those things come together so much where you're
Yeah.
fulfilling both of those roles and it's sort of like a gray area.
Yeah. I definitely agree 100% that there's overlap. I feel like we're doing the both things together at the same time. And as you said, I think I'll go back to even your first response to that first question because you talked about like creating conditions, right? Making sure the conditions are there, the contingencies are there, so those that you lead can be successful. And I kind of see it like that too a bit, Luciana. Whereas as clinicians, we're really focused on like the client outcomes, right? Whoever the client is, whether it's child, adult, it doesn't really matter. But
Mhm.
as the leader, to me, we're really focused on making sure those conditions are there, like you were saying earlier, right? That produce the outcomes we want to see them produce or engage in. And then I see it also as the difference between treating a case, treating this behavior, like those kinds of things as a clinician, whereas as leaders, we're building capacity. And I feel like that's what you said when you talked about behavior skills training, right? You're building their capacity, you're
Yeah.
training and teaching and leading. So let's shift a bit to servant leadership. I mean, there's all different kinds of leadership, right? Luciana, there's servant, there's transformational, there's all different kinds. But I feel like servant leadership really applies, across whatever it is we do, whatever our job is, our role is, things like that. What would you say that looks like daily, Luciana, in the life of a behavior analyst like yourself or like me, like being servant leaders? And, like I think I'm asking you the question, but I'm thinking of, this, long time view of ABA as this like you must do this and it's all compliance based, but really not coming from that
Right.
servant approach, right? What are your thoughts on us as servant leaders?
Servant leadership, it's funny that you mentioned that because, in my classes for my doctorate, there was a whole class focused on servant and transformational leadership.
Uh,
So as soon as you mentioned that, we had to like memorize various foods and do a presentation and everything. So
yeah,
there's an author by the name of Tim Blanchard, and he stated that servant leadership is all about making the goals clear and then
mm,
like rolling your sleeves up and doing whatever it takes to help people win.
Yeah.
And I thought
I
he
like
did
that.
an excellent job at laying that out.
Yeah.
Um, so like servant leadership in our day to day is, I feel like given an opportunity for others to benefit, right? When we have that opportunity. It was hard for me, but I had to learn how I used to like to do, I need to do everything myself. I need to do the assessment. I need to do the interviews. And then it becomes overwhelming because you have so much going on at the same time with, other clients and assessments.
Yeah.
So sharing that power and control to drive
Yeah.
engagement. So it's not like I'm
Yeah.
passing my workout. I'm actually getting, like, they're benefiting from this opportunity to learn how to do these different assessments, to learn how to, build a rapport with parents and staff by doing these interviews, and maybe then want to pursue, you know, their position in the field further,
Yeah.
or begin to ask questions or think about things, or, have a better understanding of why goals are what they are, why we're collecting certain data. I feel like it opens that up to them because now they're involved in the process that gets you there.
Yeah.
I think another big point, and I mentioned it before, is just listening, right? Listening to their concerns, which I think sort of gives them the opportunity to grow and develop, knowing that they have the support there. And like I said, overall, the servant leadership is just remembering that it's a benefit for all. And then mentioning that, I'm thinking back, and I'm not probably going to explain it as good as, as the professor did, but he gave an example of that servant leadership, to look at it like sort of like a backwards capitalistic view, where it's not that traditional leadership where you have the board of directors, the CEO, the managers, and then the employees. You flip it around. Servant
Mm.
leadership, it's your employees, then the managers, then the executives and the board of directors, and just symbolizing like how important the employees are in that whole support.
Yeah. I like I like that example, and I like the one you led off with. You think you said it was Tim Blanchard with like rolling your sleeves up and doing what is, what
Yeah.
is needed. Yeah. Yeah. So I like that. And I think of that too. I think that was a really good, explanation of servant leadership from like our perspective and how we can be, servant leaders as behavior analysts. And then you mentioned like, which 100% I agree with Luciana. I had to get to the point where I had to start to delegate and share tasks because I'm just like you in terms of, listen, I want to do this thing myself because I know my standard. I know how it's going to come out. I know it's going to be fine. And at
Yeah.
some point, you gotta start letting go, and you gotta start delegating because of a number of reasons. Like you're gonna overwork yourself, but then we're not giving those who we're leading, those who we're supporting, the opportunities to learn, right, and grow. And I always use my phrase "train to replace," right? So
Mhm.
I really like that you said that because it's really, to me, like power with instead of power over. How are we working together and supporting them, right? And then,
Exactly.
right? So I really think, what you said really aligns with my views too. And then when you mention about rolling up the sleeves and just stepping in there and doing what needs to be done, I feel like it goes back to your first response in terms of how can we make all of this easier so they can be successful, right? So those are some of the thoughts that come to mind based on what you said. So yeah, I'm really, really great perspectives, Luciana, on these topics we're talking about. So I'm also big, Luciana, on humility, right? Like ever so often, Luciana, of course, yeah, we can pat ourselves on the back and all that stuff, but just being
Yeah.
humble in the sense of, Luciana, in the sense of like learning, understanding, like that sense of humility to me, and like not always having to be the show, right? Not
Right.
having to be the sage on the stage, our old, analogy that we use, but just like the guide on the side. So can you share a time, Luciana, when stepping back and letting others lead was like the best way to serve the client in that moment?
I've found that after sharing the information that I need to share, like during an IEP, if
Yeah.
possible, making a seat at the table for the one-to-one staff, whether it be a BHP or a BT or whoever, when this is the case, and sort of stepping back to give them opportunity to share their input with the team.
Yeah.
Because my thought is like, while I create the programming and provide the training, they're with the student almost every day, right? Depending on how the services is delivered. And I'm there maybe once a week, depending on how the
Yeah.
hours are. So
Yeah.
I just believe it's important that the client support be available to share that important anecdotal information that we may not see or that may not be reflected directly through the data or whatever the case is. I feel like they hold this unique detail insight in a client's behavior. Like I said, because they are there consistently, they spend that direct time with the individual so they can share that crucial information that I might not know, that the parents might not know,
Yeah.
that the teachers might not see during the time that, that they're there. And that information really helps because it helps us identify why behind, most of the behaviors and then support the interventions that we're going to put in place. They often are able to also like identify preferred items and activities.
Yeah.
Cause I feel like that can change any given day or any minute. Like, like I wanted this and then I don't want this. And that has happened plenty of times where the RBC would be like, no, he doesn't like that anymore. He doesn't eat that anymore. This is, so I'm like, oh, okay. Like, thanks for letting me know. Or he doesn't play this. And I'm like, okay, you got this. Let me stand back. um, and again, like let them take the lead, like I said, because I feel like, are more familiar with the client because of their role.
Yeah. I like everything you said, and I was smiling when you spoke about like the IEP because I thought of that, the meetings, Luciana, but I also thought of, so two examples I'll give. One, we would do trainings, right? So it's like, all right,
Hmm.
giving everybody some slides or whatever. So sharing, I don't have to be if they're doing the whole training. I don't have to be if they're planning the whole training. And then it got to the point,
Yeah.
Luciana, where I was just sending them out on their own. I don't even need to be there, right? This school called. This is the training they want. This is the topic. Plan something, put it together, go deliver.
Hmm.
And that's coming a long way for me because like before I would like, yep, need to be there. Nope. You know what I mean? So like just, and then you being there too, like me being there, I feel like it just takes the light off of them because naturally people just, based on like, okay, so I'm the supervisor, they're there as like trainees and whatnot. So it just kind of takes the shine
Right.
off of them. And
Hmm.
then in meetings to Luciana. So say for example, meetings where advocates are present or, if I'm in a meeting because staff asks like, all right, we just need some moral support, but I make it clear, like I am not here to lead this meeting. I said,
Yeah.
imagine me just as a fly on
Um,
the wall. And
yeah.
if something comes up and you're having difficulty, I can step in, but I'll put it on you to say, we'll pass this question to Dr. Bob or something like that. But I make it
Right.
very clear. So, because if I don't, then they wait on me to lead the meeting. Or sometimes I know like they've asked like, all right, we want to talk about this kid and we'll all log into the virtual meeting sometimes and no one's saying anything. I was like, all right, you guys call this meeting. Go ahead, take the floor. So
Right.
when you mentioned the IEP, it made me think of that. But it's kind of like Luciana, as strong leaders, we don't always have to be central. Just
Hmm.
helping and supporting. Again, going back to the guide on the side as opposed to the sage on the stage. So they can shine and they can be successful. And I think it creates opportunities and contingencies for them to contact reinforcement so that they can continue to grow and lead too. In whatever it is that they do. So here's another big hot topic, Luciana. It's burnout, right? And I feel like, if I'm being honest, the world sped up. It slowed down a bit initially once COVID hit, right? 6 years ago
Yeah.
now. And then it just sped up, right? Because then there was all of this in technology, all of this, like the online, the virtual meetings, there was no more travel time. So there's no breathing room.
Right.
Everything now happens so fast. Like if we think of evaluations, like the whole process, because now everything you have like where you could sign off on your PTRE online. So no longer you have to wait for it in the mail. Like everything happens quicker. So we're doing more meetings. We're having more evals, all of those things. And then forget the part about, things change at work, the policies, procedures. It's very, I feel like, Luciana, since COVID, like the likelihood of burnout to me is more of a hot topic and more of something that's at the forefront than years ago, Luciana, when we were in the field, right? I mean, that's just how I
Right.
feel about it. So how do you lead yourself, Luciana, through burnout, that often comes with the high intensity work that we do? I mean, even if we're just talking about challenging behaviors, let's just
Yeah.
even do that. How do you help keep yourself, from getting burnt out?
I'm still working on this. So
That's
it,
an honest answer.
a process. So in addition to work, I have three kiddos. So like I
Right.
said, it's a process.
Yeah.
But I sort of, it might sound funny, but I begin to work myself into the schedule because I have
Mm,
my work schedule, then I have the kids schedule, and then
okay.
somewhere in there, it's fitting me in. So I'm working myself in there. And depending on how my day is going, I'm using some of those self-regulation skills that I'm teaching the
Okay.
kiddos and specifically like proactive self-management, right? And not trying
Yeah.
to reactively fit myself in because if I do it
Yeah.
that way, then it's not going to happen.
Yeah.
Mm. So I think over the past couple months, I've been trying to define like a clear work schedule and
Mm,
resist the urge to work late
yeah.
and setting designated hours and letting, my families and parents know that from the beginning. So then there's
Yeah.
obviously there are cases where there's emergencies and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
trying to stick to the strict hours
Yeah.
is one thing. I try to focus on consistent sleep. This has been variable.
Same.
Um, I've incorporated walking, well, which I
Uh,
really have no choice though because I have a dog, so I have
okay.
to.
Okay.
So that's
Okay.
good. So I get in at least 2 walks a day.
Okay.
Um, and then trying to stay away like from the fast food and stuff
Mm,
and cooking a meal.
yeah.
And I would say in the morning, I'll listen to, it's like, you can just Google motivational videos.
Yeah.
And one of them, they're like, these three things follow in the morning. So
Yeah.
the three things, like I disconnect from technology. Usually when I used to wake up, the first thing I do is check my phone. So
Mm-hmm.
other than turning my alarm off that wakes me up in the morning, I don't check my phone for the first hour that I'm woke. I'm focused on getting
Okay.
ready. I walk the dog. What's my schedule for the day? Right.
Yeah.
And then another thing I would say is like using my PTO because in the
Mm,
past I would lose my time.
yeah.
And I'm like, okay, I did work for this time. I earned it. And
Yeah.
then I didn't use it. And I'm just trying to reconnect now with what I like to do. So reading,
Yeah. Yeah.
actually reading a book, not an audio, not listening to an audio book, but actually reading a book,
Yeah.
um, tennis and hiking. So
Yeah.
it's like I said, a work in
Work in
process
progress.
is
Yeah.
getting there.
Yeah. No, those are really good examples. I like the example of not checking the phone, for like the first hour, like everything I can't wait. Like you could still have been sleeping within an hour, right? So I like that. I like that you saying like, scheduling yourself in. That's really good, getting the walks, all that stuff. But I also like when you mentioned self-management. It just makes me think of like we're practicing the ABA on ourselves, right? Like literally
Yeah. Yes.
practicing ABA on ourselves is what we're doing. But it's so, so, so critical. And I also liked what you said about using your pay time off
Yeah.
because there was a time, when I just wouldn't use my time off. Like I never got to the point where I lost it, but it was just like very rarely I would use it and it would build up. Okay, great.
Right.
Like, sometimes building up is good, but I've been
Yeah.
doing that a lot more, Luciana. So I totally agree with that. And the one thing I can tell you for me that I've been really having to, and this has been some time now, is so I'll give you two examples. There was a meeting I had recently, and I called it just a meeting where it was all about regulation. Like in the meeting, because you know how sometimes, we can have those where it's like it gets really tense and you have
Right.
to just like work again, going back to the self-management. So like the self-talk little channel, like keep talking to myself, the deep breaths, like, all right, just pause, just listen, and the other thing to Luciana is like I work on, but I also tell people is it makes me think of talked a bit about or learned a bit about acceptance commitment therapy, right? And that psychological flexibility. But to me, it makes me think of that, like managing the situation, Luciana, without becoming overwhelmed, managing the
Hmm.
situation without taking it on. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because
Yeah.
if this is a
Yeah.
work situation, why am I taking it on myself and getting all upset and, making it
Right.
impact me personally? So that I've been working on. because sometimes we just get so tied up and enveloped into what's happening, and everybody else leaves and they're fine, and we're still like upset and we're still like fussing and like, you know what I mean?
You
So,
remember that acronym Q-tip? Quit taking it
yes,
personally.
yes, yes, yes. You're reminding me of all the
It's
good
hard
stuff.
though.
Yes.
Sometimes it's hard.
Yes. Sometimes, yes, 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 Luciana. Sometimes it's hard. And I have to like, just like, all right, Esther, pause. Like literally the self-talk. Because we do get in those situations, Luciana, like if we're being honest, like it happens. But it's like, all right, what do we do in this moment? And I'm not saying like I'm perfect. There are times when, you might hear a little raise in the tone or something, but you got to be like, all right, you got to self-check and like reel yourself back in, because at the end of the day, we're all humans. And I keep trying to remind people of that. Like everyone at the end of the day is a human. So it's that, but then it also makes me think, Lucian, of like, just being trauma informed. Like everybody at the end of the day could be going through something. The one thing I talk about all the time, I'm not sure if you saw Pat Fryman's There's No Such Thing as a Bad Boy TED Talk. I talk about it all the time because you saw it, right? You know what I'm talking about? Yeah.
Yeah.
And I always go back to that baby in the backseat analogy where that woman was at the red light and everybody was honking, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. And, until one person got it and they realized her baby was in the backseat and wasn't breathing. And then all of a sudden the compassion comes on, and you know what I mean? So that's what I've been trying to work on in addition to all the things you mentioned. It's still a work. I need to work on sleep. That's what I need to work on.
And you mentioned in that another technique I feel like I got from you, that reflect, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So that
Yes.
was like a big one too, where thinking about
Yeah.
the situation and then,
Yeah.
how you could have done differently or what could be, and
Yeah.
looking back on things and,
Yeah. So on that note, Luciana, ascent conscious or ascent in behavior analysis is very big. It's another hot topic, right? Lots of research on it, lots of systems and providers changing their approach, your philosophy and your methodology. But what behavioral systems, Luciana, would you say, or do you think we can put in place to ensure that, how we lead, our leadership remains compassionate? I'm just very big, and you are too, Luciana, on just compassion, period, right? Regardless. But then that we remain compassionate and ascent conscious, right? What are your
yeah.
thoughts on that?
Just to sort of piggyback off of what you were just saying about, we never know what's going on
Mm.
in someone's life or, things that are happening. So I would say like regular check-ins,
Yeah.
whether that's with like the staff or the families, because so much stuff is going on in the world that affects everyone differently. So checking in, and that can be as far as like, the staff's comfort level and the school or daycare, because sometimes when these individuals go into these environments, you never know what you're going to
Yeah.
get as far as
Mhm.
dealing with the staff that's already there. I had a BHC that went through like a real difficult time a few months ago, where the director of the childcare facility she was at was like talking down to her and like, I'm the director here, you do what I say. And she wasn't being disrespectful in any way. She was just like, I'm going to walk away from this conversation because I don't like the way you're talking to me. You can follow up with my supervisor.
Mhm.
And then she was told like, don't ever come back, which I praised her for the way she handled the whole situation.
Yeah.
And then my follow up encounter with that director was the same that my DHC received. So there wasn't a positive outcome in this situation. Well, in the end, because, our client wound up transferring to a better educational
Mm.
setting, but just letting them know that, I am here for you. I'm here to support you. Um, and that overall, just checking in to see how people are doing. Just like,
Yeah.
how are you doing today?
Yeah.
I feel like we walk past a lot of people or encounter a lot of people without individuals even waiting to say hi or smile. There are plenty of times where I will like hi or wave at someone going into or out of our place, and it's like I'm not even there.
There.
So
Yeah.
I so I think even when that happens, just, trying to stay positive, right? So if that's what
Yeah.
I'm encountering when I'm here, like, what is my staff encountering here?
Yeah.
Um, I think again, going back to making sure that we're practicing that active listening, just like it is when we're talking. Like,
Yeah.
I guess we could say making eye contact even though it's a video.
Right.
With that nonverbal feedback, like
Yeah.
the shaking, moving our heads or hands or whatever. And then like listening without interrupting, letting someone get their thoughts. Are we letting them say what they need to say before just like cutting them off or jumping to conclusions? We need to be fully present. I feel like in conversations, whether we're responding, verbally or, giving feedback. I feel like there are many times I've had conversations and then at the end I'm wondering like, were you even listening to what I said? Because
Yeah.
you just asked me a question and I just told you that.
Yeah.
So like I said, making them feel like they're being listened to and we're, communicating back and forth with. I think another part of the compassion, again, we mentioned it a couple times through our conversation, is just like reward and praise. Like
Yeah.
I said, I feel like everyone loves to be acknowledged for what they do. And it doesn't have to be monetary, as BCBAs, we're limited to that anyway.
Yeah.
um, but
Yes.
praise, even saying like acknowledging good job, using specific praise on whatever it was that was done, I feel like goes a long way because you're acknowledging, right?
Yeah.
And then just to bring all those together, I think they help by hearing, like building that relationship, just like we
Mm-hmm.
have our staff do with the clients when they go out, and then understanding that it's not just when you first get with the client, it continues to happen. You're continuing to build that relationship. So I think focusing on that is really important.
Yeah, I think so. Definitely, you made me smile with the active listening, right? I'm not interrupting because doing the podcast, like, it's like striking a balance with like the head nods. Because if I have to say yeah all the time, I'm interrupting, while the person is talking. But it's like that balance of like, yeah, I'm listening to you, but I'm trying to even it out and space it out because there's also too for listeners. If every 2 seconds I'm like, yeah, it then interrupts what they're hearing. So it's like
Right,
I've been working on it. But to your point, interrupting, whether it's a podcast or just a conversation in person, it could really be disruptive to the person speaking. So you make a really valid point there in terms of active listening, like, and I think your point is even stronger because we could be listening, Luciana, but then we keep interrupting because we're hearing what they're saying and then we want to make our point. So I think it's both, like distinguishing like active listening and interrupting. It's two totally different behaviors, right? How do we operationalize them and then how do we work on making sure like we're doing both? And to your point, it's nothing more dismissive than you've said something and then someone has to ask you something that you've just so without them telling you they weren't listening, like they're telling you they weren't listening, right? So
right.
and then the trust is lost, those kinds of things. So yeah, all really good points. So saying all of that, I feel like those are all examples that you would share with those that you lead, right? That you mentor. How do you mentor others, though, Luciana, to see themselves as leaders, right? And not just as practitioners. And that's something, this. I'm big on Luciana. So like always having conversations, with staff about, all right, so where do you see yourself? Like it's like evaluation time now. So like even in my evaluation meetings with staff today, some of them were like, I really haven't thought about that. And I'm like, but I'm always like, asking people those questions like, how do you help them see themselves as leaders, not just as practitioners? Or how do you help them see skills that they have that they perhaps don't even recognize that they have?
Right. I feel like I gauge their interest by seeing, are they interested in other positions in the field? Or
Mm,
are they fine at just staying in the position that they're in currently and not going further? Like, are they in
true.
school or interested in going back to school? I would say for those like wanting to stay in a position that they're in, I do like just making sure that they're fine with it, but continue to expose them to the information that I feel like that they should know anyway in working with the client. And like I said, understanding the goals and programs and treatment plans more so anything that's relevant to what they do. So for example, if I'm conducting an assessment,
Yeah.
and I mentioned it before, making them a part of the process by including them in, doing the interviews or the testing, preference assessment or whatever that may be. I would say if they were interested in going further, And I've done this with a lot of my recent staff who are PhDs and
Yeah.
some of them weren't even aware that they could even move to be an RBC. So sharing that information with them and then guiding them, to the website and giving them the resources and going through the process with them and letting them know like the steps that they need to take, providing them the resources and the guidance. For those that feel like pursuing like their BCBA or BCABA, I feel like ensuring that my goal for them is making sure that they get opportunities not just to learn from me, but others that I know of in the field also. Because while I do things my way, it's good to see how others do it. So then you get a sense of like, oh, like I like how she did this and I like how he did that and sort of make their own way.
Yeah.
I mentioned briefly at the beginning, coming into the field, it was just like, okay, I want to try this because I seen somebody do this way, but it didn't work for me. So just trying to figure out how to manipulate and make it fit for me. And then that takes a whole bunch of time that you don't have.
Yeah.
So yeah, just helping them find their own way through those different experiences and finding their own niche of how they want to train, how they want to do assessments and scheduling, in addition to the ton of other things that we have on our list to do.
Yeah. No, I love that. And really, what you said, Luciana, is really exposing them to contingencies, right? Because when you said like exposing them to different supervisors or different, experiences, that Luciana is very critical because oftentimes that's how people learn, oh, this is out there, whatever. And they might still stay in the field of ABA, but like, as you mentioned, their niche, they might move into something else. So I think that's really critical. And I think that goes back to the previous question is allowing them to shine, allowing them to explore other things. And it's not just, okay, yeah, great, I have this great leadership style, but no, there are others too. So like that you don't have to be central and the power doesn't have to all be with you. So that makes sense. And I think for me, Luciana, it's a lot of helping people see the influence they already have. And sometimes how I phrase it is like literally, Luciana, like you're already doing this thing. You just not in a position, you just don't have the title. So
Exactly.
Right? Yeah. And oftentimes people are doing so much and they're doing all the things that people in higher roles do and they're not even thinking about it. And, even like encouraging people to move from like a teacher position to like a service coordinator position, right? I remember, encouraging, a staff to consider that. And she was very hesitant. She was like, I'm good where I'm at. But it's just because I saw of how she held herself, how she carried herself professionally, how she led meetings, how, things like that. And I was like, you really are showing me the skills that, service coordinators need to be service coordinators. And she brushed it off for a while, and I wasn't pushing her to do it, but I ever saw it and be like, well, what are your thoughts? Are you still on the fence? And then she eventually applied, got the position. And then she came back, like, obviously we're not working in the same job at this moment, but she did come back to thank me and say, I really, really appreciate you, like, continue to encourage me because then she loved it. She loves it now. So I think a lot of that, is for me. And even for you, I've pointed out skills that I've seen in you, like you're very organized, like, oh, hands down, like, right? So I knew if I wanted something in a particular way, my go-to was Luciana. Like, she would have it done. It would be neat. It would be, it would just be that's a skill you have right there. So again, it's really helping people recognize like, all right, these are the skills you're already doing the thing. You're already doing it. The only difference is just making it formal. So I think supporting people in that way is helpful.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing that stands out in my head whenever I think of Luciana. It's just as you said, and I think that's why you mentioned earlier the delegation and letting go, because you know what I mean? You're so specific about how you do stuff, but it's always just so organized, things like that. So, and then I've received feedback too from others from who you've submitted, like whether it's the VB map report or the FB or whatever, that, it was just so detailed and comprehensive. So like kudos to you on that. Yeah, definitely a strength there. Yeah. So then we're starting to wrap up, Luciana, but then I think of us in our field, right? Like what is our impact beyond just the classroom or beyond the client or beyond the family, right? And thinking of like public policy and systemic impact, and how can we use behavior analysis, Luciana, to lead change like on a systems level or in our communities, rather than just, individual or based on the family, and especially thinking from us like minority communities, like, urban communities, people people from communities of low socioeconomic status, like thinking of those, so just from our perspective, based on our backgrounds, how can we really use behavior analysis to lead, community level change, at least at that level where it moves from just the student and the families to the entire community and society?
Part of my dissertation that I'm working on is the high rates of suspension and expulsion in early childhood
Mm-hmm.
education and sort of bringing that to light. So when I think about going beyond the individual and the families, which is where it starts, and going into community and public service, just bringing that to light and how big of a problem that it is.
Yeah.
I feel like I only found out about it by being like directly within the field and families that encountered the problem of their child being at home or being called to pick up your child, or that your child is not a good fit for our environment, or your child is no longer, can no longer attend. And I think bringing light to that, engaging with parents, like putting the word out there, getting more research on it, and then sharing that information with policymakers. I had brief like conversations with like state reps within like the Delco, Philadelphia area about
Mm,
this concern, and it's not something that's on their radar. It's not something that they are thinking about. But knowing that, this moves from the school to prison pipeline and that these high rates are occurring with 3 to 5 years old, maybe 6 year olds, this is something that we sort of need to tackle before, well, it's already a problem, but before,
right.
it becomes a more uh, difficult situation to sort of handle. Um,
Yeah.
so I think definitely that's an area that I've focused in on and sharing that information. I know every time I get a new family, I share the information through a training, just giving them that information and making them understand, specifically in Pennsylvania, the educational law concerning their child and having access to their education and how important that is. And when that's not happening, making sure that they're advocating or finding someone to advocate, whether that's me or, accessing an advocate directly. So then we can have, policies that educational settings are following, or making sure that they're receiving the training that they should to know what is allowed and not allowed in their facilities. So that I would say is sort of my behavior call of action, that people become more informed, specifically for me, about these rates in the early childhood education and how it's affecting our children from an early age. But again, there's other things to be concerned with too, and we've
Yeah.
talked about it. But I think making sure another call of action is making sure that we as BCBAs take on that role of that servant leadership, being present,
Okay.
visible, supporting our staff and families through whatever way that we can, and making sure that some way that we're sharing that information so that it goes beyond just our families.
Yeah. No, I really like that. And especially that you mentioned suspensions and expulsions in preschools. I mean, there is a school to prison pipeline. I just called it the preschool to prison pipeline at this point. But I see Luciana as like really an epidemic. Like it's lingering, it's continuing, it's getting worse. And it's to the point now, well, I mean, you know this, and I know you're doing your dissertation on it, so I'm sure you have a lot of rich research there. But where preschools now are just like so emboldened to just say to the parent, like, yep, if your child is an IP, yep, we're not accepting you. Or, unless you come with a one-to-one, or like really placing those demands
Mhm.
on the families, right? So there's that battle. And then you have the families, going to the, for example, the IUs or the local education agencies, like, all right, well, now you need to give me full day programming, but like explaining early intervention is a service. It's not preschool. It's not,
Right.
school based services. So It's definitely, a topic, Luciana, that really broaches on the subject of advocacy, community, how ABA can be, helpful in the community. Because if we can support schools and support families, right? And I know in your role as behavior analyst, it's a lot of collaborating with schools and families, right? And community agencies to support the children, that are on your caseload, right? So I think that's really a rich avenue, Luciana, to be able to talk about public policy, what are some things that need to change, really getting involved in advocating. And in that also, Luciana, would be to me another thing like teacher turnover, right? Because if we have, behaviors and the schools like suspending, expelling, sometimes too, they're doing it because teachers are leaving, So the topic you raised like really covers a lot of community issues that if we can help explain, like, ABA goes beyond just individual skill acquisition. Here are all the other benefits, right? So if we can support the teachers to gain the skills and implement the strategies that you were saying earlier, so then now the students are learning, all right, here's the routines for school, things like that. Then at the end of the day, it benefits the community because they're in school, they're learning, they're growing, teachers are working, so I think that's a really good avenue, that you're pursuing. Yeah.
Possibly decreasing burnout.
And decreasing, yep. 100%. Exactly. There you go. Right. And then it all comes together. Yeah. Yeah. That was a good recap and bringing that in 100%. Yeah. So that's absolutely, another benefit of that. Yeah. All right. So Luciana, to close us out, our conversation tonight, which has been fun so far, but I know you got the littles, you got things to do. Like, I know that they're being so good, being quiet and leaving you alone.
They are.
Yeah. You got to reinforce them.
I'm what I'm going to see. I don't know. I got to check and see what they've done first.
The realities of motherhood and working, right here. But they're going to say, but all you said, Mommy, was just be quiet. That's all you said. Got to be specific, Mommy, if you want us to be quiet and be clean. Like, yeah. Oh, my goodness. No, they're being really good. I'm not here at Splat. Yeah. Yeah. But if you could leave our listeners, Luciana, with just one behavioral call to action, right, regarding their role as leaders in service, like something they can do tomorrow, like a Monday morning, moment, what would that be?
I will say that the goal for yourself today and every day, thinking about how can you make change, right? What can you teach someone, or matter of fact, what can you learn? Learning something new every day, whether it's you learning it from an individual or doing research or whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
But just trying to make some type of a difference for someone, whether it's saying hi, how was your day?
Yeah.
A new concept. What are you interested in? Again, going back to, building that rapport, that relationship goes a long way.
Yeah. Yeah. So the change, learning something new and making a difference, right? Is that kind of what I heard? I think. Yeah. 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 So no, I love that. And especially your point on learning, it's a good point to close us out on, because I always say, and as we chatted like before we started recording, is I always learn, from the conversations. And like, I appreciate, as I was saying, the reminders. So like the behavioral art, I'm like, yeah, oh yeah. The Q-tip, quit taking it personally. And then the other one you reminded of me was the reflex and respond. Yeah. So, and that Luciana just warms my heart. It honestly does, because, and that's why I do what I do, right? So whether it's the kid, whether it's a stuff, the fact that you retain that and now you're like, all right, I remember this, like, it just, it literally warms my heart. And so the point of this is also to Luciana, like, learning something every day. So like someone listening to this, listening to you, listening to me, like could learn, and that could be just what they needed to hear for that day. Who knows? And at the end of the day, Luciana, that's just what it is for me. So even if it's one person, Luciana, it's more than zero, right? And that's kind of how I think of it. So I really like that you close us off. It's like just always learning, always learning. I like that. Yeah. Well, Luciana, I appreciate your time. I appreciate your kids even more for giving you for, this about 60 minutes, I think it's been, and all that you've shared. And, again, Luciana, we've gone from, I met you at in your grad courses, and then we worked together, and you
Yeah.
always had that drive, you always had that commitment to moving forward, right, to doing more, and you've held true to that. Finished grad school, got your supervision hours, got your BCBA, worked in the field, and now pursuing your doctoral degree. I mean, and especially as Black women, like, you know what I mean, like, we have to be proud of that, because it's representation for others, for kids growing up. Like, all right, you know what I mean? It's representation for our
Right.
kids, first of all, and then it's
Yeah.
reputation, I'm representation for others in the community. So I'm really proud of you, all that you've done, your commitment to yourself, right? Your children, and just the field, and just continue to do. And the more you learn, then the more you can help others. So keep doing what you're doing. Keep smiling.
Thank you.
And I know you'll hang in there, because I mean, you've shown me you can do that. So I don't even just you got that down. But yeah, I'm very proud of you. So just keep being you. Keep being you.
I appreciate you so much. And again, I said, I'm so proud of you doing your thing. You're always doing your thing. You're writing books. You got your podcast. You know what? I'm really proud. I feel like we've both come a long way, but yeah, continue to grow and share your joy. Cause I feel like no matter what, you're always like full of joy and you pass that on.
Oh, thank
So
you.
continue to do that.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Well, have a very wonderful evening, Luciana.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to Behaviorally Speaking Leadership for Changemakers. And Luciana, thank you for sharing your experiences, your wisdom, and your heart with us today. Today's conversation reminds us that leadership isn't measured by how much we accomplish ourselves. It's measured by how many people become stronger because we led them. Luciana challenged us to think differently about leadership by viewing it as a repertoire of observable behaviors that shape people, teams, and communities. She reminded us that great leaders intentionally create conditions for others to succeed. Sometimes, the most powerful leadership behavior is stepping back, sharing responsibility, and creating space for someone else to discover their own voice, confidence, and capability. When we build capacity instead of dependence, we create leaders who can carry the work forward long after we've stepped away. So here's your Monday morning move, one behavior to practice this week. Choose one opportunity to intentionally build someone else's leadership capacity. Instead of providing the answer, provide the support. Instead of taking over, create space. If this conversation sparked a new perspective or reminded you of a leader who invested in your growth, we'd love to hear your story. Share it with us and join our Behaviorally Speaking community. And if this episode resonated with you, please share it with a colleague, a friend, or another change maker who believes leadership is about building people. For more leadership insights, coaching, and professional development, behavior-based resources, and our companion blog, Behaviorally Speaking Insights for Changemakers, visit esthercbubaviaservices.com. Until next time, lead with humanity and purpose, practice with compassion and intention, and create meaningful, lasting change. This is Dr. Bub, and remember, leadership is behavior, and behavior tells a story. Stay inspired.